Hello, so I'm Jeff Evans from the Georgia Tech Research Institute, and I'll be presenting on some of the connected technologies with status and user security concerns as part of this panel with the Star TIDES program. First, I do want to thank Hemant for this opportunity and to be on such an excellent panel with Admiral Simpson and Mr. Colley Patch. It's been a pleasure to be connected with Dr. Linton Wells also over the years and see the great research that George Mason and particularly Star TIDES with its mission for outreach to support access to underserved areas. It's an area very near and dear to my areas of interest as well. We had connected previously, particularly in experimentations that were being done with Georgia Tech at the Naval Postgraduate School's GIFIX exercises, the Joint Interagency Field exercise that's hosted every few months. And in particular, these were around the areas of disaster response technologies. The presentation here is an evolution of work that's not a singular focus on national cybersecurity, but it will explore the confluence of technologies that include the Internet of Things, 5G, and data analytics with emerging artificial intelligence as part of that. It's derived from various research programs that I've supported and presentations that have been conducted by me for over the federal government and for industry. Now, it's going to be very high level given the time frame involved, and I believe that you have access to the slide deck, and I look forward to further discussions and possibly even technical collaborations from some of these discussions that we will have. So with that, I'm going to switch to the presentation mode only and stepping into the presentation. And I will go through this all fairly quickly, but I'll start with an outline describing my background and the connections to different components that we're going to be discussing of the networks, a brief overview of the intersection of Internet of Things, 5G, and analytics, and how security is critical with many, many concerns to address. This is high level, as each of the areas themselves could take hours of in-depth technical details, but then I'll end with some concepts around security at the device, network, application, and even the user awareness becomes critical. And we'll talk about use cases of pervasive access to data, both at the personal and at the city, local government level. Following the summary, you'll see a few data points of interest down below that might be links that you can connect into. But that being said, a short version of my background that led to some of these connections and some of the collaborations here is I do work at the Georgia Tech Research Institute, which is the applied research arm of Georgia Tech. My background has been primarily mobile comms, interoperability, and emerging technologies and access to underserved areas and resiliency. A lot of my work has been DoD, but the latter there is one area of significant interest. I'm a member of the Office of Undersecretary of Defense National Spectrum Consortium Executive Committee, where we're trying to mitigate the loss of spectrum that's going to commercial away from the DoD or the sharing of it. And now there's a major focus on 5G test beds for how that's going to impact the Department of Defense. Over the years at Georgia Tech, I've also co-founded an Institute for People and Technology that focuses on the intersection of people and technology and that impact. And then founded SEDATE, which is an Internet of Things center for which I'm currently the chairman of the board. But the key is that there's been a lot of applied research programs and efforts and technologies, and with each of those, it's really addressed or helped to drive some of the things that I'm going to describe here. It's very hands-on, very applied, and a lot of lessons learned. Lower left-hand corner was early days of a new thing called Wi-Fi that I was helping to deploy for some Native Americans. Upper right-hand corner, testing some urban wireless systems and platforms from a rooftop of one of our buildings in Atlanta. And then lower right was testing WiMAX capabilities at rooftops and mountains, getting into the ravines in Montana. But one critical aspect of why this is so important, and one of the early examples is I was testing one of the systems you see there. I was testing 3.65 gigahertz. It's part of the new mid-band spectrum for 5G. We were testing that service. It had just been listed as unlicensed. We gladly set it up on the rooftop of a building at Georgia Tech, fired it across to our smart home on campus for connectivity, and a short while later, we share a parking deck with Georgia Public Broadcasting. They came over and they knew me and they said, hey, whatever you're doing, turn it off. It just knocked NPR off the air. So the reason being is they were using antiquated 3.6 to 4 gigahertz satellite downlink. They were supposed to have upgraded it. We were supposed to register our system. We didn't know that. But the point is our system got into the front end of their network and knocked them off the air. And of course, it just happened to be right in the middle of a book report that NPR was doing on the Shadow Factory, the story of the NSA. So of course, that prompted a lot of conspiracy theories. But the key here really is that it is incredibly important, even then, as we migrate to much more dynamic and flexible systems, that we have to be aware of what's happening. The security is incredibly important, and the management end-to-end and full knowledge is just is absolutely imperative. So I will start with the standard illustrative cartoon, and I'll give you just a moment about this timeless truth that is still here. What this title is named, I've used this actually for several presentations, but it's still completely relevant. You may recall that Google paid $3.2 billion to buy Nest. And they didn't do it because they wanted to just help you with HVAC monitoring in your house. They did it because it provided much more information and insight into your lifestyles in your home, so they could target you with better informational support with ads, basically. And this is still the case for much of the IoT and sensors. And with advanced data analytics, it's only getting more precise and more pervasive. And I'll demonstrate a couple of quick examples. But moving on quickly, this is a very high-level example of what 5G is bringing to the table as you start to integrate this. It's low band, it handles everything. And we have slides on what it's supposed to be able to do beyond some of the hype. Low bandwidth, low power needs, as well as high bandwidth and high availability application requirements. It is designed with the fact that there's billions of devices that are already out there and more coming for Internet of Things. It can also, set up the right way, support low latency requirements for, say, autonomous systems that need sub 1 millisecond. And then it can function with low power requirements, and as we already talked about, a wide range of spectrum. Bottom line is, I call 5G more of an ecosystem of technologies that is carefully orchestrated and data coordinated. Because, for example, cellular, Wi-Fi, LoRaWAN, and some of the apps that utilize those are not going away. So how do you integrate those with security, management, and analytics and manage that across this overall infrastructure? That's why I consider it really an ecosystem. So moving on, here's where some of the connection issues actually can cause some of the serious issues. The extensive features for 5G concepts offer, in many cases, new attack vectors. Now, the interesting thing is that these new capabilities actually can offer protective features, and we'll describe how that can be. But data analytics, we've already seen, is producing far more awareness, and adding artificial intelligence and advanced algorithms that get smarter every day. The Internet of Things does provide billions of possible attack targets, and they're growing every day, and especially those that are not managed very well or have been left in place for too long. But on the positive side, I do see IoT, 5G, and AI as really the holy grail. It's supporting full autonomy, society enhancement, and personal support. And ultimately, since most of this is going to be autonomous, is 99.9% of actionable requirements, then what you want is the person gets that one individual, that one bit of information wherever they are at just the right time in a matter that they can act on as needed. So you could say, well, just, okay, so why are we, why are we actually concerned here? So some of the near-term concerns is also some of the things I just stated. There are billions of devices that add to more attack opportunities. Network slices, where you can break down the core network of the 5G radio access network and the core behind it to have service level agreements for each slice that supports either text messages as simple as that, or financial technology, fintech. It may support data uploads for many different platforms and services. And all of those have different types of service level agreements. The mechanisms aren't there, the standards are still developing, and we've decentralized security in many cases. We want to process in order to meet the latency requirements. We want to process at the edge, manage the data as much as the edge and make the decisions there and send it back down to the device. More bandwidth. We're touting the bandwidth, but a lot of current security monitoring cannot keep up with the multiple slices, multiple service level agreements, and the actual speeds that are there. And of course, we always are short on training and knowledge and the regulations. So the way that's being resolved in many, many cases now, or right now the focus is zero trust. You have the ability to isolate and not trust any type of device or component of the network that is out there. And that's kind of a simplistic statement of that, but that's really where we are at the moment with the zero trust. And then increased use of VPNs. So develop enhanced encryption. We have blockchain, quantum. Quantum has a lot of potential behind it. It's challenging, expensive, and still not quite there, but could that be the ultimate in terms of encrypting your data? I referenced that the benefit of edge processing can isolate it from most of the network. Massive MIMO and beamforming can further segment and make it harder for someone to get to your network. Rapid isolation of zombie devices, those that have been out there for so many years that they're no longer supported by the manufacturer, and they can easily become compromised systems. But we have to incentivize both the manufacturer and the consumer to be more aware and then sponsor those upgrades. And then eventually comes down to what's happening even now, broader social awareness of what's happening, and to try to bypass that potential barrage of just total misinformation. All of those are primitives that are underlying the new deployments and developments that are happening right now. So just to go through a couple of quick security examples, these were three, slightly dated, but the most important one that most people probably know about is the Mariah botnet. With that one, they were able to exploit cameras and consumer routers and cable modems, devices that had manufacturer chips in there that had used the same manufacturing password. That was realized if they were able to get into those and then issue denial of service that wound up taking down half the East Coast and a large part of the West Coast and other entities, as well as Twitter and much of Netflix. It just so happened to also be run by three people who did it. Two of them ran a company that did denial of service mitigation techniques. They, in their altruistic manner to show that they did it for a positive reason, decided just before they were arrested to release it to the public. And so it has now been picked up by bad actors around the world and is back in many, many different forms, including something as simple as the "oh my God, it's back" botnet. So these are not going away, and these types of devices, zombie devices and devices that did not have proper security to begin with, at the endpoints are still out there. That's going to be in government, in consumer, it's going to be in the Defense Department as well. And that's why national cybersecurity is so important. And it could be, this particular joke is actually exploring the idea that would organized crime realize they're able to use your network and as part of a botnet. So why don't they develop the upgrades and the constant connections for your smart appliance? You think that it's still being upgraded. It's kind of a challenging way to look at it, but that is being discussed. So ultimately it comes down to, it's not a new focus. We have similar technical problems as computing systems, but IoT by itself, with all of the smart sensors and devices, it's a low cost and it's a rush to market. So security can impact how that happens and how fast that happens. So they rely in many cases on put it out there and wait for the third party. And that's why the most technical promising solutions right now are to be able to isolate the internet from the exploited devices and not trust them. And that's part of the zero trust architecture. The bottom line is that policy just cannot keep up with some of the changing technology, and it's no longer acceptable to just look at a appliance, for example. There's a device in your home that connects to the internet, but far more than that is a computer that actually is connecting to the internet, and therefore treat it accordingly. For those of you that want to look into this a little further and want to take a look at a couple of papers, please have at it. That's just a quick snapshot we did of just IoT related devices. And the key is that this is just for IoT. You can just imagine what is happening as well for 5G, for applications, and there are just so many out there. So with that, we're going to look at a couple of prime examples, both at the city level and at the consumer level. This is by no means a complete list, but one that I've used in the past that I think is still incredibly relevant is under Project Shine using a Shodan search engine. There was a few-month study that said how many devices are out there that are PLCs or SCADA-related devices for power, smart grid, that has potentially public-facing IPs and therefore possible vulnerabilities. And in just a few months, they found over 1 million. Those have now, the magnitude of exposure is 10 times what that was. And you can see they impact all types of services, medical devices, traffic management, automotive controls. So this is just an example of, as you make the device smarter and want to be able to manage it and control it, the impacts become far, far higher. I might add also that we're working, in addition to some areas we're doing with logistics and supply chain with the Marine Corps. I won't go into those details there. Instead, I'll reference public safety. FirstNet 5G that many of you may be involved in, that's taken advantage of all the fact that the sensors are integrated everywhere. And so at Georgia Tech, for example, we've integrated smart sensor graphing data analytics to understand how the police should be structured, where they should go in certain locations, as well as something we call the GT-COP, a common operational picture that integrates multiple sensors, cameras to social media, to license plate readers, et cetera, all into a multi-layered, open sourceable aggregation that can be used in multiple sources. So these are some of the positive benefits. Now, some of the negative side benefits, including that we're always connected. So what does that actually mean? This has been approved. It's been released out in the public in many, many different forums, so I include it here. It could expose something as critical as military secrets, people who were based in forward operating bases and were out for runs with their Fitbit, and they were running the perimeter, and then they would upload it to Strata, and then Strata was actually exploited. And from that, people were able to determine the perimeter of the fence and the times that people were running and all information that could be of some value. So that is a critical concern that needs to be addressed by the fact that we're always connected. And likewise, wearable medical devices, only on the cusp of that right now. But I won't give away the storyline behind Homeland, but for those who haven't seen it, but if you have, some of the issues around medical devices has and can happen. And we've all heard the stories of people who lost injury payouts because they claimed some type of injury, and then they uploaded a lot of social media that showed them that they were not as injured as they thought. Ultimately, what this is going to come down to is we did an example of this at Georgia Tech, where a day in the life of healthcare for sensors, and that included, you have a Fitbit, that's a personal health record. You have maybe you're also diabetic, and so you have an insulin pump that goes to your other records that would be HIPAA related. So now you have both personal records and HIPAA related that may be going over the same gateway, both in the home, when you leave and you're traversing the pathway to work, then you get to work, and now you've hit multiple networks. But all of that information has to be assigned specific privilege managements and identity management so that you can continue to make sure that those are separated, even though they're working over the same network architecture. Now, this is a consumer one. You can imagine how that might impact at a national level in many ways. So with that, I'm going to do a very, very quick overview to try to stay within the time limits. The bottom line is, I love the statement, data is the new oil. So how do you protect that data? How do you use that data for positive good? But you have to protect it against the bad actors. And because literally 5G connections with IoT on the front end, AI with data analytics, is going to lead to tremendous efficiencies in productivity. That's going to be a huge capability. Autonomy is going to happen for about 99.9% of all the data that's out there, so that you don't drown in data. But we need to personalize data on things we haven't even talked about, the explosion in AR, VR, mixed reality that's rapidly evolving. And we have to be careful there that you don't have so much AR that it becomes to overwhelm the senses of the human, and you really can't make good decisions that way. The government, the cities, they're already exploring data analytics now. Blockchain and related capabilities are being added in to help protect and secure and verify. Another key component, verify the data. And I did not go through a global run because of the length of time for this presentation, but as you know, there are numerous global companies and governments that are racing to develop these networks for the ownership, control, and security. And you can see things that are happening right now with areas such as Huawei and the concerns with not being able to manage the network at potentially a national level. And of course, we haven't addressed, there's moral questions that abound and that drive policy around what is data privacy. It's different than security, but it's, in many cases, it can be just as important and just as devastating if that is violated. And then ultimately, it comes down to the user engagement. The knowledge basis is critical to solving these issues, and yet it's always lagging. So we are only at the beginnings, at the cusp of something. If you haven't seen it, see The Social Dilemma and realize that we're only at the beginnings of that. And I think that will be pretty impactful. So that's kind of a bit of a negative way to end this, but the point is, I see the confluence of these events as being a huge boon and a positive for people, but we must bring cybersecurity, privacy, and restriction to the data, or encryption of the data, to that has to come along as an equal partner right up front. And with that, it's been a very high-level presentation. I hope that the broad perspective of companion technologies that match up with the national cybersecurity requirements makes, and compelling use cases will drive some thought-provoking and hopefully some research. So I would love to take questions in the format we're going to take them in here. And I am more than willing to engage and follow up with you at any time. So with that, I certainly appreciate it, and thank you.